All right, we have 1 o'clock, so we are going to go ahead and kick off. I know there's some other folks that are still joining us, but wanted to welcome everyone to our kickoff webinar for the myFutureNC Opportunity Youth Network. On behalf of the myFutureNC team, the Opportunity Youth Network Advisory Committee, I extend a warm and grateful greeting to each of you who've taken the time to join us today. We have community leaders and practitioners from 31 counties across North Carolina with us today, folks who have trusted relationships with our youth, who engage with them at various points on their education to career pathways, and who have a vested interest in their individual success and the success of their community. So we thank each of you for the work that y'all do day in and day out, and for coming to the table around this important topic today. My name is Melissa Caperton. I'm the Director of Regional Impact at myFutureNC, which is the nonprofit organization focused on achieving the state's 2030 attainment goal. Co-leading this effort with me is Commissioner Kevin Austin from Yadkin County. Commissioner Austin, would you like to introduce yourself?
If I can find the unmute button. Yes, thank you, Melissa. Hey, everyone. Thanks for being here this afternoon. I'm Kevin Austin, County Commissioner from Yadkin County and former president of the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners. And I'm honored to be with you today and to be part of this Opportunity Youth Network, because we know what important work this is for all of us. And while I was president of the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners, I had an initiative around disconnected youth in North Carolina, and we studied some programs that were best practices and shared them out through the Pathways Report, which we'll talk about just a little bit later. But it opened some eyes to me and connected me with myFutureNC, and certainly the initiative to provide 2 million certificates and degrees across North Carolina by the year 2030 speaks to my heart as a county commissioner and as a manufacturer and employer. So it was a perfect match for us to work together. And I want to thank Melissa and everyone at myFutureNC, Cecilia, everyone. Thank you for the invitation to be part of this. And, you know, we're going to be doing this for, we don't know for how long, but we'll be doing quarterly presentations. We're going to be drawing in best practices from not just from North Carolina, but from across the country, including Sam Rouser, who's with us today from On Point for Education from New York State. So it's awesome to have Sam with us today, but you can look for more exciting and interesting programs to be presented through this forum as we move forward. So again, thank you all for being here, and I'll turn it right back to you, Melissa.
Thanks, Commissioner Austin. A few logistics before we get started. We are recording today's webinar, and we'll make it and the resources that we'll be sharing out today available to all attendees and those who registered in the coming days. If you need tech support with today's webinar, my friend and colleague, Lashika Hester, is available to help. Her information is at the bottom of the slide there. Big thanks to Lashika for organizing today's event and for handling all of the technology. We've got lots of folks joining us today, and so you have been put on mute, but please feel free to ask any questions that y'all might have in the chat box, and we'll address as many as we can during our time together. And those that we are unable to address, we will be sure to follow up post-webinar. We have a rich agenda planned for y'all today. Commissioner Austin and I are going to kick things off with an overview of the Opportunity Youth Network. We'll then turn things over to Dr. Becky Tippett, who is Director of Carolina Demography. She's going to be sharing some information about Opportunity Youth data trends here in North Carolina. And then, as Commissioner Austin indicated, we have the privilege of hearing from Mr. Sam Rouser, who is Executive Director of On Point for College. They are a nonprofit organization up in New York whose mission is to break down barriers that prevent young and underserved individuals from achieving education and career success. He and his team have been nationally recognized for their work, and so we're real grateful to both he and Dr. Tippett for joining us today. We wanted, before we kick things off, to also take a moment to find out who's in the Zoom room with us. So if Lashika, you wouldn't mind to launch that first poll. If y'all could take a moment to answer the question about what sector you represent, K-12, higher education, workforce development boards, business, nonprofit, county commissioners, library. And as you can see, we have a really wonderful, diverse mix of folks on the call today. So thanks to all of you for taking the time to join us. We can go ahead and share the results here. Excellent. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Before we dive into the meat of today's conversation, we wanted to take a moment to sort of set the stage about the work that we hope to accomplish with the myFutureNC Opportunity Youth Network. First, you may have previously heard youth who are not connected to work or school referenced as disconnected youth. We are intentionally using the term opportunity youth to really highlight the assets and potential that these young people represent in their communities. You'll hear more about the national data and state data in just a moment from Becky, but to really help provide context around the urgency that we saw to pull together this network. In 2019, Measure of America reported that 1 in 9 16 to 24-year-olds were opportunity youth, and these are pre-pandemic numbers, right? At that point, our state ranked 32nd out of 51 in terms of how many opportunity youth were in our communities. For a majority of our youth population, the transition to adulthood is aided by strong attachments, both within educational institutions, which are gradually supplemented and replaced by workplace or professional ties. But for too many youth in our communities, these connections either don't exist or they aren't strong enough to help students stay on their intended pathways. And so recognizing the cost of opportunity youth, both their own personal loss opportunities, whether it's wages or lost other opportunities in their pathways, the loss that our society experiences with opportunity youth from lost revenue and increased spending on social services. We felt there was a real urgency to focus on this work locally to help address the expected increase that we will see due to the pandemic and really help our opportunity youth and support them in reaching their full potential. We are fortunate at the state level to have leaders who are helping guide the work of the Opportunity Youth Network. Big thank you to all of them for the time and thought that they contributed to the planning of this kickoff, as well as upcoming learning opportunities. So what is the Opportunity Youth Network? This is a statewide network, as I said, of 31 counties, and with it, we aim to create a community of practice where practitioners, where community leaders are going to come together regularly to share, to learn from one another, to engage with each other. And we aim to lift up practices and strategies that will not only help youth stay on their intended pathways, but also identify opportunities and strategies to re-engage those who are not connected to work and school. Our hope is that every county represented in this network, every community represented in this network will be able to identify, replicate, build upon at least one new practice that they learn about through this network. These are the 31 counties represented in the myFutureNC Opportunity Youth Network. Communities were identified through data provided on the myFutureNC County Attainment Profiles, which we'll talk about in just a moment. But we are so grateful to have the continuum of youth connection represented in this network. As you saw from the survey results, K-12, higher ed, workforce development boards, county commissioners, library staff, nonprofits, and others. We really aim to engage folks in communities who have those established, trusted relationships with our youth and who have the ability to enact change at the local level. So please, as additional learning opportunities come out, feel free to share them with others in your network to help bring folks to the table. To help provide some context on the work of myFutureNC and why this focus on opportunity youth is so important to our organization, to our state, and to our ability to reach the 2030 goal, We're going to share a quick video with y'all that highlights the findings of a report done by our friends over at Carolina Demography called the Leaky Pipeline Report. A link to the report and video are on here on the slide here, which again we'll be sharing out post-webinar, and if one of my colleagues wouldn't mind to put a link in the chat as well, so y'all have easy access to it. But this gives a really good demonstration of where we do lose our youth along their pathway.
On the first day of kindergarten, parents and loved ones bring their little ones to school for the very first time. If you ask them, they'll tell you they want to be a doctor, a lawyer, an architect, an astronaut. Unfortunately, 13 years later, not every kindergartner walks across the stage to receive their high school diploma. These students represent 100 average ninth graders in North Carolina's public schools. Of these students, 13 will not graduate from high school. 15 will graduate from high school but have no plans to enroll in college. That leaves 72 students who plan to enroll in college, but 19 of them won't enroll after they graduate from high school for one reason or another. 12 will enroll in college, but will drop out after their first year. 11 more will make it through their first year, but they will not graduate from a community college or college within the first 6 years. That leaves only 30 students. These students will obtain a college diploma from a community college or a four-year college or university. That's only 30% of the group we started with. What does that mean for us?
I'm Cecilia Holden, President and CEO of myFutureNC. We're a nonprofit organization with a specific goal for North Carolina. By 2030, we estimate North Carolina's economy will need 2 million people with high-quality credentials or degrees. Right now, we have about 1.3 million. If our state's growth continues at its current rate, we will be short 400,000 skilled workers by the year 2030. That's because 2/3 of those jobs will require employees to have some education beyond high school, a high-quality credential, or a degree from a university or community college. A more educated workforce will attract businesses to and retain current businesses in North Carolina. More education means higher salaries for our workers. Our goal has unanimous bipartisan support from leaders in education, business, and public policy. That's because the statistics paint a clear picture.
39% of North Carolinians say they had attained less education than they had hoped.
Half of employers in North Carolina said they need more hireable workers.
Students who attain a four-year degree earn almost twice as much as those with only a high school diploma.
Most students who drop out will never return to finish school.
What is myFutureNC doing to increase our educational attainment? We're engaging the public to raise awareness of the issue. We're bringing together stakeholders and sharing best practices from those already doing outstanding work. We're collecting and sharing data to establish local goals, measure progress, and promote data-driven policy. We're partnering to remove friction points and streamline our state's education systems to ensure more of these students make it through.
We are myFutureNC. This is their future. This is our future.
I love that video because it really does help visualize some points on the education to workforce continuum where we have barriers to address locally and across the state. Today, we wanted to highlight some resources to help you all understand these data from a local context and some first steps that you could take around addressing opportunity youth locally. Throughout our time together, as Commissioner Austin indicated earlier, over the months to come, we'll be highlighting resources to help support your local work. And two that we wanted to lift up today are the myFutureNC County Attainment Profiles and the Pathways Initiative Task Force. First, the myFutureNC County Attainment Profiles. These are really a tool to help begin the conversation at the local level on specific opportunities locally to begin moving the needle on attainment. You can find your county attainment profile at the link here. If one of my colleagues wouldn't mind to put the link in the chat as well. At that link, you will find profiles for all 100 counties, as well as a Excel spreadsheet that has data variables for all 100 counties. So you can do some sorting and comparison. In the labor market outcomes section of the county attainment profiles, which is the fourth section here at the bottom, you'll find data on the percent of youth who are considered disconnected in the county. A note that what you find in your county attainment profile will be a bit different from what Becky shares with you today, and she'll get into more detail on that. But the next version of these profiles, which we anticipate in early 2022, will have the most up-to-date information available. These are really an excellent resource to begin local conversations about the barriers that do exist on the pathway to education beyond high school. And we do encourage you to use these to begin identifying where your youth may face challenges that as a community you can implement strategies to address. We also wanted to call your attention to the Pathways Initiative Task Force report, which was led by Commissioner Austin and the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners. Commissioner Austin, I'll turn it over to you to talk a little bit more about this resource.
Thanks, Melissa. And before I move on, I just want to say I keep my county attainment profile handy at all times, because I'm going to tell you this is a wonderful tool. And I think all of us on this Zoom session are tasked with improving the lives of the people around us in our communities. This is a great map right here to guide me to where we need to be focused in my county, Yadkin County. And I do also want to just go back to that leaky pipeline video. That thing is so powerful because it really illustrates the opportunity that is right in front of us with the Opportunity Youth in North Carolina. Because you think about, there are 30 out of the 100 who reached the finish line. It's the other 70. And those are low-hanging fruit. You know, those are the ones we're talking about. Those are the kids who didn't make it all the way through. So it's a tremendous resource that's available to us in North Carolina if we can figure out how to tap into it and bring them back and create these pathways. And so that's what led to the Pathways Initiative, understanding that that is what is key to getting us where we need to be in North Carolina with the attainment goal that Cecilia explained to us all. We created the Pathways Initiative through the Association of County Commissioners and involved commissioners from all across the state. And I want to say a special thank you to Michael Brose and Karen Howard, who co-chaired this committee. We also had about 15 commissioners from all across North Carolina who really have a special connection to not just to education, but to their communities and communities all across North Carolina. They understand the importance of this work, and they were also instrumental in building this report. So we worked for a year, several meetings with presentations of programs from across the state, narrowed them down, created a report that's probably about 30 pages long. It's not a hard read, and it's full of resources of programs in North Carolina. Again, this is sort of the predecessor of what we're trying to do here with this forum, only we want to reach further. So we'll continue that work here. One of the programs that we looked at in the Pathways Task Force was the Robert and Janice McNair Educational Foundation program they have in Rutherford County, and it's a tremendous mentoring program where mentors are provided from students, for all students, beginning in the 7th grade, and they follow them through to graduation. They work with them on a continual basis to make sure that they're taking the courses they need for the sort of career path they may imagine for themselves, and that they're just staying on track. One of the biggest problem is losing these kids in the first place. So half of the task is to keep them on course and not allow them to fall into the disconnected youth category. Another great example is the Catawba County K-64 program. And I just want to point out, K-64, that's generally the continuum for us as we grow and develop as human beings. And so it goes well beyond the disconnected youth, 16 to 24, both starting in K and going all the way to retirement. And through COVID, you know, we've realized just what an opportunity there is, or what a need there is, to reach out to people who've left the workforce as a result of COVID or due to changes from COVID. So we really need to be expanding our thinking about how we can reach more than just the 16 to 24 with these programs, but incorporate all ages. Another great program was the Forsyth Academy of Continuing Education, the FACE program. It works with an off-hours class schedule available to kids who they may be facing all sorts of difficulties that may be obstacles with traditional learning. Some of them may have social issues, blending in with their fellow students. Some of them may have family tragedy that's forcing them out of the normal work or school day. So this program can provide after hours education so they can continue. There may be some who've, I don't know, maybe they become justice involved or something like that. So this Forsyth Academy of Continuing Education creates continuing educational opportunities so these kids don't have to drop out, they can continue. It's just another great example of what we've seen across our state. Those programs and others are in the Pathways report. You can go to ncacc.org, look for presidential initiatives on that website to learn more about the pathways and to see the report itself. So I'll turn it back to you, Melissa.
Thank you, Commissioner Austin. And yes, we will include a copy of the report and the resources we send out. There's a wonderful list in there of folks you can consider bringing to the table around Opportunity Youth. I will say we are going to be lifting up the mentoring program in Rutherford County at our next learning session, as well as a program similar to the one you see here at FACE that Tri-County Community College is leading out in the western part of the state. So good information to come when we next convene in December. Before we move over to Becky and Sam, who are going to help lay the foundation for our work ahead, we wanted to do one more quick poll with y'all to hear about what specific areas of engagement and an intervention that you, strategies around that you'd like to learn. Lashika, if you wouldn't mind to launch this final poll, you'll see some specific points on the continuum for which you can indicate an interest, and you can choose all that apply. Again, as we think about strategies and programming to address Opportunity Youth, what are the topics that you're most interested in learning about? We know the list that we have here isn't exhaustive. And so you'll also have a chance to answer this question in a post-webinar survey. We'll have an open-ended opportunity for folks to provide some feedback on what y'all would like to learn. And it looks like we have an all of the above reaction, which is wonderful. Great, we can go ahead and share the results. So excellent feedback. Please do take the time to answer the survey at the end of our webinar that we'll be sending out in the post-webinar email so that we can get some more specifics from y'all because we really want to maximize this network and learning opportunity with y'all. So with that, I will turn things over to my friend, Dr. Becky Tippett, who's going to walk us through Opportunity Youth data trends. If you have questions for Becky, a reminder to please put them in the chat at the bottom, and we will address them at the close of her comments. Becky, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thanks, Melissa, and good afternoon, everyone. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and let's see, is it coming up? All right, everybody got it?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so I am excited to share some data with you. You were the first people to see this data, but just before I kind of jump into the data, wanted to give you a brief overview of where we're going. So one, I want to make sure that you know kind of what Carolina demography is. Then I want to talk a little bit about the changes that we made to the state dashboard. Melissa's already previewed them some. Then we're going to look specifically at who are opportunity youth at some of the data, and then we'll get into some county level estimates that we just made. I want to note that we are releasing kind of an overview of some of these changes and what we know about opportunity youth in a post on our blog today. So we're going to be putting some more information out there, but you guys are getting a sneak preview at some of the materials that are coming out later. So a little bit about Carolina demography. We kind of exist to answer the question more broadly, where is North Carolina heading? And we are an applied demographic consulting unit within the Carolina Population Center at UNC Chapel Hill. And what that actually looks like ranges significantly, but the long story short is that we work with a lot of data. And part of this is I want to make sure that you know that we are here for when you have questions about data. We don't always have the answers, but we do our best to try to put you in touch with the right person. And I will say, because of where my webcam is, I can't see questions in the chat. So Melissa, if there's anything that I really need to address that comes through, please let me know.
I will let you know.
So, all right, that said, couple things to highlight when we're talking about the state dashboard. So this is the dashboard with the 18 overall performance indicators. It's a little bit different than the county profiles. We did two things. First, we've changed that language to be from disconnected youth to opportunity youth. And then the age range has been changed from 16 to 19 to 16 to 24. You can see there's a screenshot of what it looks like. Also keep in mind that we have a new functionality on the state dashboard. So at the state level, you can see any indicator by demographic group for which group there are details available, and we have that available in kind of an easy to use interactive. It's always been there, but we're trying to make it a little bit easier to access. So that's what we did on the state dashboard. And so when we're talking about opportunity youth, we're really borrowing a lot from the work done, the great groundwork that's already been laid by Measure of America. And so when we're defining opportunity youth, there's our individuals that are 16 to 24 years old that are not working and are not in school. So they have to meet all of those criteria to be defined as an opportunity youth. So this is going to look, we have data on opportunity youth going back annually to 2006. And when we looked at just the 16 to 19, that spiked around the Great Recession and then really kind of fell off pretty quickly, and it is fairly low. Is never really much over 10%. When we look at 20 to 24 alone, you see that that overall is a much higher share of individuals are identified as opportunity youth, in part because the 16 to 19-year-olds, when things happen, they're still fairly attached to high school. So there's a stronger potential attachment to compulsory schooling. When you have economic conditions getting worse, the staying in school or not dropping out can become more of an option than it is for somebody who's 20 or 21. And so we think that that might be what's going on there. We also know that in the 20 to 24-year-old range, there are going to be some more like childbearing and caretaking for family that may be going on. That's obviously just not as common. It does happen in 16 to 19, but is less common. So overall, what we see is when we shift that age range a little wider, the rate of disconnection or the opportunity youth rate increases a fair amount. So it's going from about 8% for 7 or 8%, I think maybe 7% for 16 to 19 to more like 11% for 16 to 24. So the other big shift is that when we go to 20 to 24, instead of in 16 and 19, where men were slightly more disconnected than women, when we look at 20 to 24, that's reversed and actually quite significantly. Again, suggesting that there's going to be some family caretaking element going on here in childbearing. So we can't fully control for some of that. But I think given the way today's economy is, we do have some concerns about no school and no work for a large group of people. So when we go to the 16 to 24, you see that now women are 11.4% disconnected compared to 10.7% of men. So it's a somewhat, it's a pretty big shift in terms of who's now being identified as an opportunity youth. So that's kind of what happened when we made those changes. And so when we look at who are opportunity youth, they have some really key characteristics. So this is at the national level, and this was done by Measure of America. And on the left-hand side is what are the characteristics of opportunity youth? And on the right-hand side, what are those characteristics of individuals who are not opportunity youth, the people who are either working or in school or both? And one, we can see that opportunity youth are much more likely to be living in poverty, living with a disability, living in an institution like a prison or a jail. And I think particularly relevant for this conversation is they're significantly less likely to have completed high school, and they're more likely to have dropped out of high school, and they're significantly less likely to have a bachelor's degree. And they're generally, if they do have a high school diploma, they didn't really go on beyond that. So in terms of this conversation about meeting the state's 2 million attainment goal, there is a real clear opportunity for this population. We do see that a larger percentage here are women with children. So as I've mentioned, I don't know that that's always going to be as much of a concern, but that's a different population to be targeting. But I wanted to highlight here that this is really, that education piece is really different among these two groups. So again, I mentioned that when we look at that 16 to 24-year-old age range, in 2019, it was 11% of North Carolina's 16 to 24-year-olds who are not working and not in school. And I want to emphasize that this includes individuals who are unemployed, incarcerated, or at home for family reasons. So this is a pretty comprehensive definition of opportunity. And one of the reasons we're using the American Community Survey is that it captures the whole population, including those who are incarcerated. So that's about 1 in 9 North Carolinians. That's pretty similar with the national rate. Numerically, that translates to about 141,000 North Carolina 16 to 24-year-olds who were not working and not in school in 2019. So when we look at that trend over time, again, going back to 2006, you can see that in 2006, North Carolina actually had slightly lower opportunity youth rates than the nation. Both the United States and North Carolina increased significantly, kind of following the Great Recession, but that increase went up more in North Carolina than it did nationally. So North Carolina spiked at 16.2% in 2011. And then we saw those rates continue, kind of steadily decline over the past like 8 years. So now they're pretty comparable, very similar between North Carolina and the nation. But now the national average is a little bit lower than where we were compared to the reverse in 2006. When we look at youth disconnection by race and ethnicity, you can see that among American Indian, Black, and Hispanic or Latinx individuals, the opportunity youth rates are much higher. And particularly, they're much higher for American Indian and Black individuals. So we see that there are significant differences in the likelihood of being connected to either school or work by race and ethnicity, and that those patterns within North Carolina are broadly similar to the patterns that we see at the national level. I think one important thing here is that in North Carolina, our gaps between the overall average and American Indian and Black are actually less pronounced than they are at the national level. So there is some evidence, I think, that we can work to close those even further. But overall, you see our Asian population is also slightly more disconnected than the national average. So like I said, there's a lot of similarity here. The other thing I wanted to point out is that when we look at these racial ethnic groups, we can also look at men and women. So remember that the women overall were 11.4% opportunity youth compared to 10.7% for men. And that for most groups, women were more disconnected than men were. But there's two exceptions, but there's really one I want to highlight here. So for both Black and multiracial, that's reversed. Men are more likely to be disconnected than women. And if you'll remember, I mentioned previously that this includes incarcerated individuals. And I think that what we see here is very much some of the mass incarceration and racially disparate impacts of policing and prisons, because this is so strongly pronounced for Black men compared to Black women. So I want to flag that some of this is going to be a prison impact on what we're seeing right here. So when we look, this is another great resource from Measure of America. They have been putting out some great stuff, but this is a map of kind of opportunity deserts and opportunity rich areas by type of urban, suburban, or rural, with blue being rural, green being suburban, and the purple being urban. And you can see the darker the color, the more it's an opportunity desert. And on this map, you can see that there's some really clear kind of opportunity deserts in the Northeast and the Sandhills and rural communities. but also in some of our urban communities like Charlotte and Fayetteville. So this is definitely kind of lack of opportunity or high concentration of opportunity youth are not just an urban or a rural phenomenon, but they are occurring in both. So just wanted to emphasize that. But now I think what we're all here for, so you guys are the first people to see these brand new estimates, because one of the biggest challenges we had was that switching from 16 to 19 to 16 to 24 is that the Census Bureau does not provide direct estimates of 16 to 24-year-olds. So it's now time to talk about PUMAs. And you've probably never heard of PUMAs before because they're a really weird statistical geography from the Census Bureau. But what we mean when we say PUMAs we're talking about public use microdata areas. And so when you saw that map before for opportunity deserts and opportunity rich areas, and you might have said, well, that kind of looks like counties, but it kind of doesn't, right? So PUMAs are statistical geographies that align the county boundaries as much as possible, but they're generally aligned with areas of about 100,000 people. And they're the smallest geography at which the Census Bureau publishes individual record data. So these are the geographies we use when we're trying to get custom estimates, like what was required to do to kind of do these adjustments. And so for populous counties like Wake and Mecklenburg and Forsyth and Cumberland and Guilford, you can see here there are multiple PUMAs. But from less populous counties, you can see smaller counties are clustered together within a PUMA. So I think there's 6 counties in 2 of the northeastern PUMAs. So this is where we start to make what I call data sausage. So the way that we did this was we start with the 2015 to 2019 American Community Survey microdata. So that's one record for every person who filled it out. And then where appropriate and where possible, we provided direct estimates for the county from the PUMA data. And that's about 20 counties are perfectly identified by the PUMA data. For county clusters, we did something a little different. We calculated race. So because we saw and we see that the opportunity youth rate is very different by race and ethnicity, we calculated race-specific opportunity youth rates for each PUMA. And then we looked at the county population ages 16 to 24 by race from population estimates, and we multiplied kind of that race-specific rate times the population that was already there. And then we aggregated those numbers to obtain county totals, and we weighted for counties split across PUMAs. If anybody really wants to dig deep in the methodology, I'm happy to share a document with you that I have written about this. But probably more interest, and what I will share links for after I'm out of this screen sharing, is I have a couple of interactives with the data. So the first thing that we see is that when we shift from 16 to 19 to 16 to 24, is that it increased the disconnection rate for almost all counties. So this is the percentage point change in the opportunity youth rate when we made that shift. And you can see in the darkest green in like Halifax, I think Northampton and Halifax in the Northeast, you see some really big shifts. And that's not necessarily because the opportunity youth rate is so high, but it's because that 16 to 19-year-old population is so small and the counties themselves are relatively small, that even when the 5-year data, they didn't have any youth that met that opportunity youth criterion. So they had a 0% disconnection rate in the 5-year ACS. So we're actually getting probably a better estimate now for these places. And you can see a few counties where the opportunity youth rate declined, but overall, consistent with the state trends, it kind of went up. We also see that there are a handful of counties, particularly in the Northeast, but some pockets in the Sandhills, where we can see very high youth disconnection rates. So you can see here how now that we're using the microdata and that expanded definition, we're getting probably a clearer sense of what's going on. Because if you go back and you said, wait, these counties now have 25% of individuals are opportunity youth, and before it was 0%, I think that this is a more accurate representation of what's going on because we're getting a more stable estimate. And when we look at the size of that population, so this is a map where the circles represent the size of the opportunity youth population, and they're shaded by the percent opportunity. So the darker the circle, the higher the concentration, but the larger the circle, the more people. So the largest number of opportunity youth in the state are going to be in Mecklenburg with over 12,000. And then Wake, for example, has about 8,000. So it's a little, it's the second largest, but much smaller than Mecklenburg. The other thing that we're really trying to think about is what is the COVID-19 impact? And so just a second, before I go into this, all these maps are also interactive maps where you can download the data. I have 3 URLs lined up to drop in the chat, and I will do it in just about 2 minutes. So when we think about COVID-19, you may have noticed that all of the data I'm talking about, I'm saying 2019 or 2015 to 2019, because that's the data that we have from the Census Bureau. And 2020 was really kind of a mess, right? It was a disaster economically, it was a disaster educationally, and it was a disaster from a data perspective. We've already heard from the Census Bureau that we are not going to get the 2020 American Community Survey as it's normally released. We're still waiting to hear about the 2016 to 2025 year. But what we do know is that we saw unemployment spike, and in particular, we saw spikes among young workers. We saw declining educational enrollments, not just in K-12, but also in post-secondary. And last, among the students that were still enrolled in school, we saw some really stark changes in the learning outcomes. So we saw worse performance on end of grades, worse performance on end of courses, some changes in ACTs, which all suggest that those students who may still be enrolled may face additional challenges when they get to the next step in their kind of educational or career pathway. So even though we don't have data, we know that a lot of the data that we do have indicates that there are risks for young workers, that there are risks for young adults, and that even in the absence of data, we can guess that these numbers will be going up. We just don't know to what extent. So thank you very much. I'm happy to take any questions and look forward to the conversation.
Great. Thank you, Becky. I think we did have one question come in, but we're asking for clarification on it. Folks, if you have questions, please feel free to put it in the chat. If you'll address it to everyone or directly to me, I'll be able to see it.
Okay, so one of the questions I just got was, can you get instructions to Council of Government levels? So if you go to the any of the interactives that I just posted, do you have a download the data function? So you'd be able to download the data and then re-aggregate up. But if there's a specific data piece that's not available or that you really want to really need help with, I can work with anybody on that.
Great, and we'll be sure to include these resources in the post-webinar email as well. Any questions for Becky? She will be with us through the rest of the webinar, so if you need to think on it a bit and post them in the chat, feel free to do that. We are going to go ahead and turn things over to Mr. Sam Rouser. He, as I said earlier, is the Executive Director for On Point for College. Commissioner Austin and I had the chance to speak with Sam as we were planning for the launch of this network, and we were so impressed by the depth of his knowledge, his passion, and the approaches that they're taking with On Point for College. So Sam, thanks for joining us today. I will go ahead and share my screen and turn things over to you.
Okay, thank you, Melissa. Thank you for having me. It was great meeting with you and the commissioner, and I enjoyed talking with you. And what I'll do today is I'll kind of share at the 10,000 foot level some stuff about Opportunity Youth, and then hopefully at the end when some questions come in, I'll be able to talk more intimately about exactly what On Point for College does and how we get through. So we can go to the next slide. Okay, just an introduction. Go to the next one then. And just an introduction of myself. Again, as Melissa said, I'm Sam Rouser. I'm the Executive Director of On Point for College. just a quick overview of what On Point for College is. It's a college access program, and primarily we work with students 17 to 29. That's what we say, but one of the things we believe is that God's delays are not God's denials, and sometimes it takes some of us a little bit longer to get there, particularly with our SCOPE programs, our Second Chance Opportunity program that works with individuals who have substance abuse and criminal justice history. One of the things I shared is that if you have someone that's say started using when they were 15 and they've been using for 20 years, they really haven't grown. They really haven't learned how to deal with themselves or deal with anything. And so even though in numeric numbers, they're 35, their mentality is still that of a 15-year-old when it comes to dealing with problems and situations and interactions. And so we don't stop there, even though we say 29. We have people as old as 50 and 60 that are in our program and working through the process. It's a three-tier approach that we have. First is college access. We're helping students with access to college. Secondly, it's college success. We're going to college with them and helping them to work through that process. And then our third leg is career services, helping students with resume writing, helping them with interview skills, and helping them find careers in the areas that they're interested in. We'll look at the next. And you guys have kind of already had a view. Becky did a great job of describing what the opportunity youth are from 16 to 24. I would just add a couple other things. There are two other distinctions for opportunity youth. Chronic, these are youth who have never been in school, college, or work after the age of 16, and under-attached youth who have participated in some educational or work experience beyond the age of 16, but have not progressed or completed a post-secondary program or secured stable employment. And we kind of break them down into those additional categories. Next. So who's still falling through the cracks? So even though we have these 16 to 24-year-olds, as I said before, we go a little bit beyond that because there's systematic inequities and access to opportunity that leave too many young people, particularly Black and Latinx young people, growing up in families and community with few resources and support to help them transition to adulthood. Disconnected youth, they tend to come from communities that are themselves disconnected from the mainstream by segregation. And the young people struggle with education and employment mirror those of their parents and some of their neighbors. Disconnected young women are over 4 times as likely to be mothers as their connected peers. About 5.8 million young people were out of work and school. Then we had COVID-19 happen, and it probably erased 10 years of progress in reducing the national youth disconnected rate in a matter of months. So we're in a bigger pitfall now than we were before. And as Becky said, we don't have those numbers yet, but when they come, we've got to be ready. Next. So, perceptions, and there are lots of perceptions of and myths about opportunity of youth. But I'd like you just to think for a second. Imagine for a minute that you knew your mom and now she's not a part of the picture because you had to leave home since your boyfriend became abusive, or if you were within a month of completing high school and you have a part-time job after school, but now think that your dream of college may be pointless. Some of the situations that our students are going through and experiencing. And then think within yourself, have you ever thought or said it's impossible to help a particular group of students? Or a particular student has way too many obstacles or issues to enroll in college. Sometimes we have these positions and these feelings, and these are things that we want to get away from. Next, things that we want to move from. So what I'd like to just do is name some of the problematic conditions or risks related to opportunity youth. And I think Becky did mention a few of those: poverty, racism, substance abuse, school violence and bullying, underfunded schools, unfair disciplinary policies, abusive parents, poor nutrition, and the list just goes on. You have language bias, labeling, they only have deficits, no strength. Rather than attempting to fix the deficit of the at-risk youth, we should focus on fixing the unhealthy environmental conditions that place youth at risk and creating a more healthy fit between the youth and their environment. So let's no longer call them at-risk youth. That's problem-oriented. Let's switch that to youth at risk, which is more solution-oriented. Just share a couple myths. You know, that opportunity youth lack ambition or really don't care about college or careers. The truth is opportunity youth are often the first in their family to go to college, and they don't even have a network and support systems to help them. Another myth is we must not allow court-involved youth on our college campuses. An organization, the Center for Community Alternatives, did a national study that demonstrated that, you know, admissions policies that restrict students with criminal justice history, they did not increase campus safety and it did decrease admissions of minority males, especially African Americans. Another myth is if you're a housing insecure, all systems will give you preferential treatment. Housing insecure and unaccompanied youth, they require additional advocacy. As it relates to financial aid, and some state policies result in less aid instead of more. So sometimes if you're a young adult, at least in New York State, if you're an independent student, the max you get is $3,000 in state aid. If you're a dependent student, you get $5,000. So these students are going to require some more support. Can we look at next? So I just like people just to think for a minute, just kind of brainstorm about how your organization or you as an advisor, how do you engage opportunity youth? You know, how do you interact with them? How do you work with them? What are some of the things that come to mind when you're working with those young people and you have to deal with them? And, you could place some things in the chat if you like. You could share that and we'll kind of, if we have a second, we can share out some of those thoughts. Or I can keep going and we can do them at the question and answer period. That work better? All right,
great.
Melissa, we'll go to the next one then. Okay, so one of the things about engaging opportunity youth is we want to get them out of the community. We want to take the students out of their normal everyday environment. We want to take them on college tours. Even if the college that you're visiting is a college they don't want to attend, it's good to give them an opportunity to experience something they've not experienced before. And one of the things we've also found is taking those students on college tours, sometimes they meet students who are from their community and it encourages them to go too. One of the other things we like are pre-college orientations. The pre-college orientations really work. Even though most colleges provide an orientation, what we find is that when we do orientations ourselves, we bring in community leaders to talk to the students. We bring some of our donors in to talk to the students. And we also bring key staff and other students who are alumni so that students have a feel for where they're getting ready to go and what kind of support system they have around them. And we want to make sure that they see that. Some of the red flags we see that tell us that students may be disconnected, you know, chronic fatigue, questions regarding health insurance, they're having attendance issues, poor hygiene, squinting. All of these things help us to see that some of these students may be having some issues that we need to address and we need to pay attention to. Next. So what I wanted to do is just talk to you about some of the situations that our students encounter and how we address those issues. So let's go to the next slide. You know, many opportunity youth have experienced some emotional crisis or even trauma in their lives, not only need a caring mentor, you, the advisor or a trained volunteer, but also someone with knowledge to make an appropriate referral for counseling if needed. I want to just share a quick story with you about one of our students. We have volunteers also that work with our program and help our students. One of the things we provide is transportation to and from college within 5 hours of Syracuse. We had a student that had hooked up with one of our volunteers and the volunteer had taken the student to college. So they developed a little bit of a relationship. While that student was in college, the volunteer had reached out and the student didn't respond to any of the phone calls. So the volunteer called us up and said, hey, you know, student isn't responding. I'm going to drive out and check on the student. It was about a 45-minute drive down the road. When the volunteer got to the dorm, the student wouldn't open the door, but did talk to the volunteer through the door and explained that she didn't have her medication and she was afraid to come out of her room. She was having a bipolar episode. So the volunteer alerted us to what was going on. And we got her medication because she had ran out of medication. And what we learned from that is any student leaving one county in New York going to another county, their Medicaid did not transfer. Therefore, she was in another county with no ability to get her medication. So from that point, this was early on in the work that we were doing. So from that point on, anytime our students were leaving, if they were on Medicaid, we made sure that they applied at that next county. That young lady not only graduated from the 2-year school, she went on to get her bachelor's and her master's in social work. And she's now working with individuals that have same symptoms and suffering from the same bipolar that she did. So they have a very small network or no network to speak on many times. And Opportunity Youth are more likely unaware that select campuses may have family housing or daycare to assist with childcare. We found a campus that, absolutely would take families on. So you want to do the research and help your students find those campuses that are going to be most friendly to their particular situation. Many times if a student is court involved, if you have youth that are court involved, there'll be a special committee that has to, decide if this student can come or not. And sometimes that decision is negative. And what we suggest whenever it's negative is that they give that student an opportunity to sign up for online courses and let them take only online to prove their commitment to being successful in college. And then if they're successful after a year of online courses, that you now allow them to get on campus and show themselves. Sometimes there's social barriers that are there. Students feel rejected or unable to participate. And we often, talk to our students and relate with our students and share with them that we like them to get involved in campus activities and be involved in different things that are going on campus, to introduce them to people that can help them to be successful. At many of the campuses that our students go to, we have what we call campus angels. And these are individuals who work on the campus, who have no affiliation really with us other than they have developed a relationship because they see us bringing our students on tours and they want to know who we are. And because of that, if we can't get to the campus, that student can reach out to the campus angel and get support for whatever they need until we can get there and help them. So look at the next slide. Some of the best practices that we found, and the number one best practice when working with Opportunity Youth is to stay in constant contact with them. We got lots of technology now. There are numerous ways to reach students: texting, social media platforms, virtual platforms, phones, making appointments. Communication with our students allows us to address many of these topics I'm going to mention right now, like time management, referral to other college services such as tutoring and counseling. We can share some of the highlights from schools if we're on the campuses and we're aware of what's going on. Resolve and address financial aid issues, residential halls, or other issues and concern. We can relay information to Opportunity Youth about what's going on back at home and encourage them, again, to get involved in campus activities. We want our students to be as engaged as possible. Many students coming from many different walks of life. We want to make sure that they find groups on campus that relate to the things that they are comfortable with, the things they want to be a part of. So our best practice is making those connections, always connecting Opportunity Youth with others, and provide experience or activities where they can meet with their peer groups or work together as a team. Let me go to the next one. And then I just want to talk about best practices and a collective impact. We don't want you to try to address every need your student has yourself. And to give you an example of that, we have our students that are housing challenged. And for probably about 18 years, we work with Lemoyne College, the local Jesuit college. And every summer, our students that are housing challenged can come home and stay on that campus free of charge. And for whatever reason, while they're at home, staying on campus, the cafeteria isn't open and students still want to eat. So what we do is we go out to the local food bank and we buy enough food to feed those students for a couple weeks. We also help them find employment so they can work and feed themselves for the rest of the summer, but they have a comfortable, safe place to stay and food. So we don't have to resolve it. We have friends that can resolve it. And you want to look at what, how do you garner support and resources from other community-based organizations? I mentioned the Center for Community Alternatives earlier, and we've continued to partner with them for our students who have substance abuse issues, criminal justice history. And what they do for our students who have criminal justice history is they help them to expunge their records free of charge. So it's another service that they provide. And the other thing we say is don't be afraid to ask for what your students need. Sometimes we might think, well, that no one's going to give us that. And this has happened to us twice. We had two students at different points in times that had found great jobs, great opportunities to move on in their career, but the places they found the jobs were not on the bus line. So how are we going to get them to work every day? So we sent the message out to all of our volunteers, over 150 volunteers, and we said, hey, we need a car. And we got a car both times. Now, we didn't get the latest model. We didn't get, that, but we got a car that worked. They did not have to fix it. They didn't have to put it in the shop or put an engine in it or anything. But there are people out there who genuinely want to help our students to be successful. You just have to ask. And we just remember, it's not just you, it takes a village. And we want everyone to be engaged and be involved. So next. I just wanted to share one other story. Had a gentleman that, pretty smart young man. He had dropped out of school, and sometimes, our students do drop out. And again, I mentioned earlier, guys' delays are not guys' denials. It takes some of us a little bit longer to get it, but he actually got it, and he went and got a GED, and he actually started school. He was in about 2 weeks. His mom had an aneurysm and he had to stop out. This was before we had met him. And he came to one of the community centers, because that's where we do most of our work, at community centers, Boys and Girls Clubs, Southwest, just local community centers. And he had come with another gentleman, just really hanging out, not any intention to meet us. And our founder happened to be there and started asking him, why don't you apply to college? And he's, was telling her he already had tried and didn't work out. And now the college said he owed money and he couldn't go back. And so, she insisted that he work with us. And we were able to go back to the college and look, this guy was there for 2 weeks. How much could he possibly owe you? And really, he never really attended. Why don't you just back him out of the system? And that was a community college. If he had tried that, he actually had scored high enough on the GED to go to a university. So we had him apply to a university. He got in a university, got his bachelor's degree, and got a scholarship to Cornell University, which is an Ivy League school up here, and got his master's degree in health professions. So he's a very bright young man. It just took us advocating for him and convincing the school to give him another chance to, to spread his wings. And go to the next slide. Now, what we say is don't assume you know how a single opportunity youth feels. Instead, get to know the students better and decipher with your students what their reality is, what their hopes, their fears, their limitations, and their strengths. Relationship are also very important in this work that we do. Advocate, because the answer is always no until you ask. So we always ask you to seek extra assistance from the college. You'll find there may be some people in there who may not help, but there's always some people on the college campuses who will. And if you're not sure how to start meeting opportunity youth, we say start small, offer open houses, recruitment nights at homeless shelters, visit foster care youth workers, or meet at the probation department. These are some of the places that we go. Ultimately, it's all about helping each of our opportunity youth with their personal transformation as they mature and develop into self-reliant and confident individuals. So, finally, the opportunity youth require a continuum of wraparound services, college access, college success, career services, that they're effective collaborators with other community-based organizations, and as well as higher education institutions and other post-secondary education and training organizations and governmental agencies. We all have to come together to make it happen for our students. You may not have the power to change all systems at your organization or in your community or at the college, but what can you do as a college access or success advisor is the question you want to ask yourself. And then the thing that, we always say here Because at the end of the day, we always want to keep it on point. Thank you. And I'd be happy to answer some questions.
I'm talking with my mute button on too. Thank you so much, Sam, for those inspiring words and sharing a bit about the work that you are doing locally. We did have some folks enter some thoughts about how they are working to engage youth. And one individual said, go to where they are, meet them where they are, and establish rapport. And I think you talked a little bit about that. Would you mind to dive a little bit deeper into how you're identifying youth and building those relationships at the local level, sort of who your partners are within the community to help identify youth that you can serve?
Okay. So one of the things our founder did when she started the On Point for College program is we purposely actually did not go to the high schools. There are so many college access programs that were already working in the high schools, and we were looking for those students who no one else was working with. So there was the Boys and Girls Clubs. They have about 5 different clubs here in Syracuse. Catholic Charities Association has 4 community centers. The Southwest Community Center has a pretty large building, and they work with a lot of youth. So what we did is we went to these places: libraries, Center for Community Alternatives, the Educational Opportunity Center. Go to these places that young people are hanging out at or visiting. And you just go out there with them. Sometimes you get on the basketball court with them. Sometimes you're sitting in the group chats with them. But you go to where, as someone said earlier, you go to where they are and you find those youth. And one of the things we found that really works, once we started doing the work, and once we started helping youth, our program is 20 years old now, and it was 22. I've been with it a little over 20 years. Students came to us by word of mouth. We've never done advertising on radios or televisions or anything like that. And we would add anywhere from 700 to 1,000 new young people every year to our program. And a lot of it is word of mouth, because if the work you do speaks for itself, and it's doing, we have youth that may be used to people not doing what they say. So you said you're going to, one of the things we did early on in this program is every student that came to our program, when we did the orientation, at the orientation, we would give them alarm clocks, calculators, pencils, papers. We'd give them bedding, sheets, towels, pillowcases, and a comforter. And we take them shopping and spend $150 on them for clothing. And the kids were like, wow, some of these young people, they never had $150 to spend on clothing. And so that was much appreciated by them. And then we gave them a ride to school. And then we came to the school and we visited them while they were on the campus. These were things that helped us further develop the relationship with these students. And then meeting the student where they're at and giving them what they need. You don't give everybody the same thing. So for example, a student is going off to college and they want to go, everything is set, but they need to move in the dorm. In order to move in the dorm, you have to pay a housing deposit. The housing deposit is $300. I don't have $300. We only got $100. Well, we'll give you the other $200. Now you're in. And so that student goes and talks to another student and say, hey, they gave me $200. And the other student comes back and says, well, I didn't get my $200. And you say, well, let me look at your financial situation. We look at it and we say, you need $250. So we give you $250. We don't give you what the other person got. We give you what you need. Every student, some get 100, some get 50. We look at each student as an individual. And then we help them. I'll give you one more example of some of the ways that we help them. What happens when you get to school and you don't have insurance and you break your glasses? You just, and the tape won't work anymore. Well, we get you 2 pair of glasses and an eye exam. What happens when you have health insurance, because the campus makes sure of that, but dental isn't included and you get a toothache? Well, we're fortunate. We have a site in Syracuse and one in Utica, and we have dentists in both sites that'll do pro bono work, bring you home, fix your teeth, we take you back. So what is it that you need? What barrier exists that would hinder you from being successful? And then we remove that barrier. And that's kind of how all of that is encompassed in helping us to build those relationships with those students and gain their trust, so that they understand we're not in this for us, we're in this for you. And we're going to remove every barrier that would hinder you from being successful.
Excellent. Thank you. Someone else mentioned about introducing opportunity youth to industries in the region through work-based learning and mentoring. Can you talk a little bit about how y'all have engaged business and industry in your community to support your efforts?
Yeah, and that's a very important, more so now. And I've been the executive director for about 5 years now. So the founder was running the organization for most of the years, and we were really heavily on everyone's got to go to college. And since I've been in, everyone needs post-secondary opportunity. And that post-secondary opportunity can be a trade, it can be vocational, and it can be college. It can be any of those things. And so we've made more of a concerted effort. We have a contract with a tractor trailer school, and we send our students who are interested in being a tractor trailer driver to tractor trailer school. We're working with a local insurance company to introduce our students to the field of insurance, because everyone thinks that if you say insurance, that means you got to be a salesman. There's so many more jobs than just a salesman in an insurance company. It's kind of like the health professions, which we're also working with the local hospitals. Everyone thinks if you say hospital, you got to be a doctor, you got to be a nurse. We're trying to change that concept, because what was happening is a student would walk in and we would say, so what do you want to go into? And they say, criminal justice. You say, you saw CSI Miami last night. Okay, so we get it. And the thing is, people have a limited knowledge of what type of opportunities are out there. And if someone came to me and said, Sam, I want to be a college access advisor, what do I got to go to? What do I got to take in college? Well, there is no degree program track for that. So how do we flip that on its head and start to introduce? So now what we do is, along with our college tours, we do industry tours. Similar to what used to happen to us when we were little kids. They don't do it so much in Syracuse anymore, but I remember being a little kid and going on a tour to the bread factory. I really liked touring Nestle's because they gave us the chocolate. So it's like reintroducing that to our young adults, letting them experience what it's like for job opportunities in different industries, and then letting them help figure out what they don't like as well as what they do like.
Wonderful, thank you. And y'all are sharing some really good examples here in the chat. Another question just came in. Some of the most challenging situations I encounter is assisting unaccompanied youth, especially those with special immigration status or no status. Curious how you work through those processes, thinking specifically about financial aid. For context, there are no state or federal aid in North Carolina for students with no immigration or certain immigration status.
Yeah, and that one has been a real challenge for us. And probably we have partners in New York City who are better able to answer that particular question. For us here, there's an organization called Interfaith Works that works with undocumented students and helps them to get, I mean, in New York State, we do have the ability to get them financial aid. So that part is not as much of a barrier for us anymore. The state does provide financial aid for students who are undocumented to go to college. So that's a little bit easier for us than it would be for you guys. Sometimes it's really starting them out at, those community colleges where the cost is a lot lower, and then finding, funders who are willing to step up and help pay the way until you can pay your own way. So it's giving them that support and that help until they can pay their own way. So we find, like, for example, we'll have a student who's run out of financial aid and it's their last semester, in college, and they need $3,000. We put it out there to our funders and to our volunteers. We need $3,000 for a student to finish the semester, and it comes through when we put it out there. So for those students who are undocumented, we work with Interfaith Works, which is an organization in Syracuse that helps them, if it is possible, to get documentation, to go through the process of getting it, and then use our funders and volunteers to help us to pay the way until the student can get to that place where they can pay themselves.
It takes a village, as you said, right?
Absolutely.
Folks, Lashika has given you the control to unmute yourself if you'd like to ask any question directly or share anything directly with Sam and or Becky. Please feel free to share to do that. And while you're considering doing that, one more question for you, Sam. Could you talk a little bit more about the Campus Angel program that you mentioned? Who those folks are on campus and sort of how they operate with your organization and interact with students on campus?
Okay, so it's a very interesting process. So the way it kind of started is On Point is doing college tours. So you have this group of, it may be 10, it may be 20 African-American students that are walking around this campus, sometimes officially through the admissions office, and sometimes they found one of their alumni who was on the campus, and they just showed up and started walking around. And they're touring the campus, and people are like, who are they? And when people found out, we explained to them, we're On Point for College, college access program, this is what we do. And some people took a liking to that. So they identified themselves as, well, if there's anything you need, we'll help you out. And those campus angels have been a secretary in the admissions office, a president of a college. And it ranges anywhere in between there. And these are individuals who will volunteer their phone number and their time. When our students are actually on campus, if they have any problems, they can go see that person and they will help them navigate through that problem. Just to give one example is we had a young man who was in the ROTC. We got him off the campus and we hadn't purchased the right clothing for him for some performance they wanted him to be in. And he was about 150 miles from us and he needed it in a couple days. So the campus angel took him to Walmart, purchased the outfit for us, sent us the receipt, and we sent her the money. We were able to avoid that problem. So, sometimes it's just navigating the financial aid situation or navigating admissions, whatever the situation might be. The people boots on the ground at the campus are going to know best how to navigate through it. And these individuals have been phenomenal in helping us to keep our students engaged. One of the other things that we did, and this was really during COVID, is we engaged our volunteers to help us with what we call wellness calls. So what they did, we have a little over 2,000 students that are out in campus, and actually our staff isn't that big. We have 12 staff people who are working with those 2,000 students. So we couldn't call them all or visit them all because you couldn't go on campus anymore. So we used our volunteers to break them out into groups of 5 to 20 students. And the volunteers would call them up and check on them just to see how things are going, see what their needs are. And then they put in a Google Doc any need that they couldn't address. And then the advisors could address those needs. And that allowed our persistence rate to go from 72% to 82% in 1 year. Based on that additional connection of those students, and that was phenomenal for us.
Wonderful. Thank you. Anybody care to unmute and ask questions? Commissioner Harris, I see that you shared some wonderful work that's happening at your local community college. What community college are you with? Would you mind to share a bit more?
Edgecombe Community College. We have 2 campuses in Rocky Mount, North Carolina, and in Tarboro, North Carolina.
Wonderful. And what's the work that you're doing to get students engaged with the curriculum or degree programs?
Well, we had such a large number of young people who were dropping out of high school, and I was concerned about that, but they wanted to come and get a GED. So if they were stopped in the 11th or 12th grade, I personally brought them into my office along with their parent, because the parent has to sign off on them coming, to try to find out what happened at high school, why they didn't want to go back to high school. And if they were in the 12th grade, I tried to talk them into going back to high school, finishing out that year, even though they could get a GED, but I thought it would be more beneficial if they finished out that year. So I tried to find out what their needs were. But if they decide to just stay with us, I make sure that when they finish the GED, that they don't just stop there, because you're at the community college. Go ahead and take advantage of everything we already have. And so I was just telling about one of our young men who came in who was very shy and very smart, but for some reason, high school didn't work for him. He breezed through our GED program, our high school program, and then became a student of the community college in curriculum, got his 2-year degree. I mean, he won the highest community college award that we offered. and went on to a 4-year school. And all it was he needed was that little extra encouragement that he wasn't getting. And so he's like one of our shining stars, because now he's getting ready to go and get his master's degree. But I call my little sanctuary my ministry. If I see that a kid is hungry, my drawer, I always let them know where the food is. If I see a kid that doesn't have money to get snacks, you know, I keep a little jar on my desk. I'm married to a preacher, so I'm a preacher's wife, so I have to have a ministry. And this just happened to be it, making sure, because I graduated from this community college 45 years ago. So it's like I've come all the way around, and making sure that this can be the best time of their lives, just giving a little bit of extra. But since you already have them, let them get a certificate, they can get a degree, they can move on. And now, especially, we have free tuition and fees. I have put it out everywhere. Take advantage of it. And as a county commissioner, I want to make sure our community college is doing all that it can while I'm here.
I think we found a campus angel.
Absolutely.
Thank you for all that you're doing.
I'm an SOP too, son of a preacher. So I feel you. Just a quick question though. Do you guys have, one of the things they have is what they call the ability to benefit program, where a student can actually do those two things at once. They can finish the high school diploma and
yes,
the degree.
We do. Whether they want to go into cosmetology, they want to be a CNA, they can do them all at the same time.
Yeah.
Because, and plus we have early college on campus. And early college, you know, they get their high school diploma as well as a 2-year degree all at the same time. So by the time we send them off to a 4-year school, they're already a junior.
Yes. Yeah. It needs a lot of coaching, but it works.
Any other questions for Sam or for Becky, who both have shared such rich information with us today? Thank you to them both for all of the good information that y'all have shared. Again, you are able to unmute. If you have any questions, please feel free to do that. Otherwise, we will go ahead here and wrap up. To Sam and to Becky again, thank you for the rich context, the amazing data that you shared with us, Becky, and the content and inspiration that y'all have provided. We really do appreciate you both joining us and sharing your experience and knowledge with our newly launched network. Beginning with our next webinar, which as you can see on the screen here will be December 7th, we are going to be highlighting effective practices that are taking place across the state for you to learn from and explore what might be possible in your own communities. We will be highlighting, as I said earlier, Rutherford County's mentoring model, their community college student support strategies, as well as Tri-County Community College's adult high school. It is scheduled for December 7th at 2 p.m. So mark your calendars, and we next week should be sending that invitation for y'all to register to join that. By the end of this week, we'll be sending out an email with a copy of today's slides, the webinar recording, all the wonderful resources that we shared throughout our discussion today will be included in that follow-up email. So be on the lookout for that in the coming days. If you have others to engage locally, if you heard some ideas today, either through the data sharing conversation or the practices that Sam's implementing up in New York, and there are others in your community that you would like to bring into the conversation, please feel free to email me. Their contact information, we'll be glad to add them to the distribution list, or in the follow-up email I'll be sending, there'll be a place for you to submit that information as well. Once they register, they'll be added to our distribution list and get information moving forward. So please do think about who else in your community you'd like to be part of this conversation. And then finally, we are in the process of building an online learning community where all of you can engage with one another, share the practices that you're implementing locally, share any resources you might be using, challenges that you're having, questions that you have for your peer network. so that you can engage and learn from folks across the stage who are part of this wonderful network that we're launching. More information on that will come soon. And then I just wanted to leave you all with sort of a call for action and some local conversation starters. You know, before we meet again in early December, I would encourage you all to find some time to reflect on these questions as a cross-sector community with your partners who are working with youth on the continuum from education to career, using the tools and resources that we shared earlier, like the County Attainment Profile, the Pathways Report, and the awesome data that Becky has shared with us and will be included in that follow-up email. But think through, you know, what are y'all already doing? What good work is already taking place at the local level? What do you know about the challenges that your youth are facing, the barriers that they need to navigate in order to stay on their intended pathway and remain connected to that? And how maybe has that changed with COVID? As both Sam and Becky indicated, I think we all anticipate that the opportunity youth rate numbers are only going to climb based on the year that we had last year. Again, thinking about who those partners are in your work and who else needs to be at the table. And what ideas did you hear today that resonated with you, that you think might be a good fit for your community? What resources do you need to support that work? And what other sort of strategies do you want to learn about as part of this network? Again, we will follow up soon with materials as well as a survey to gather your feedback and thoughts so that we can maximize the effectiveness of this network. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you again to Becky and Sam for leading today's conversation and to Lashika for her technology talents. We look forward to working with each of you in your communities in the months to come. And for now, I'll say goodbye and see y'all in December. Thank you.